I never understood why my grandparents sold their house so suddenly. They had lived there for over 40 years, raised their children, hosted every holiday, filled the place with laughter, and then one night without warning they packed everything, locked one room behind a rusted key and never spoke of it again. Even as a child I felt it, something wrong in that house. The walls carried sounds that didn't belong to us. Sometimes late at night I would hear faint tapping, not from outside but from inside the walls, and the older I get, the more I realize they weren't running away from old age or bad memories. They were running away from something else, something still waiting in that house. After they sold the house, my grandparents moved into a much smaller place across town, and everyone just accepted it. Nobody questioned the suddenness of it, maybe because they seemed relieved, like a burden had been lifted. But I remember standing in the driveway on that final day, watching the movers load up boxes and seeing my grandmother pause at the bottom of the staircase. She stared at the locked door at the end of the hall for so long that I thought she'd forgotten herself. Her lips moved, whispering something under her breath, too soft for me to catch. That night, when I asked her why she looked so sad, she only shook her head and said, "Some houses keep secrets, and we shouldn't try to uncover them." I was only 11, but the way she said it stayed with me. For years, I had dreams about that house. The creak of its old wooden floors, the smell of dampness after rain, and always that locked room. In my dreams, I would stand outside the door, hearing faint scratching sounds like nails against wood, and a voice whispering my name. No one else seemed to remember the house the way I did. To my parents, it was just an old property sold and forgotten. But for me, it was unfinished business, an unanswered question gnawing at the back of my mind. When I was old enough to drive, I found myself taking detours just to pass by the old house. It had new owners then, but from the outside it looked the same. The chipped white paint, the crooked shutters, the tall oak tree in the yard that used to scrape its branches against the roof during storms. Every time I slowed my car near the property, I felt this heaviness settle in my chest, like the house was still aware of me, still waiting. Once, I parked across the street and sat there for nearly an hour, watching the lights flick on in the different rooms. A young couple lived there now. I remember the woman stepping out onto the porch with a cup of tea, and for a moment I thought about approaching her, asking if she had ever heard anything strange at night, or if the far end of the hallway still made her uneasy. But I didn't, because how could I? How could I explain that I was afraid of a door I'd never been allowed to open? That night I dreamt of the house again. Only this time I wasn't standing outside the locked room, I was inside. The walls were covered in deep gouges as though someone or something had clawed at them from within. The air smelled of rot and wet earth, and in the dream, I wasn't alone. I could hear slow, deliberate breathing just behind me. When I turned, there was only the door, closed. I woke drenched in sweat, my chest pounding. I told myself it was just old memories, childhood imagination festering into nightmares. But the dreams kept coming, each one more vivid, more insistent, until I couldn't shake the feeling that the house hadn't let me go at all. It was still reaching for me through walls, through sleep, across years. The dreams grew so persistent that I finally broke my silence and asked my mother about the house. We were sitting in her kitchen one afternoon, sunlight spilling across the table, when I blurted out, "Why did Grandma and Grandpa really sell it?" She froze, the knife in her hand hovering above a half-sliced apple, and for a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. But then she sighed and said, "They were getting old. It was too much to keep up. That's all." Her answer was too clean, too practiced. I pressed further, asking if she remembered the room at the end of the hall, the one that was always locked. She frowned as though the memory barely existed for her. "That was just storage," she muttered, dismissing me with a wave. But her voice had tightened and I could see something flicker in her eyes, something she didn't want to acknowledge. That night, I called my grandmother. Her voice, frail but sharp, cut through the line when I mentioned the house. "Don't go back there," she said immediately, before I'd even explained why I was asking. "Promise me you won't." When I asked why, all she would repeat was, "Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Leave them shut, child. Leave them shut." But that warning had the opposite effect. It ignited something in me. Because if it was nothing, if it was truly just storage, why the secrecy? Why the urgency in her voice after all these years? I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, my grandmother's words echoing in my head. "Don't go back there. Don't open the door. And yet every part of me knew that one day I would. A few weeks later, I finally gave in to my curiosity and drove back to the neighborhood. It was late evening, the sky bruised with the last light of day, and the house stood just as I remembered. Quiet, unassuming, but somehow watching. I parked at the end of the street and walked toward it, my footsteps crunching against the gravel. The couple who had lived there before were gone. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the grass. I don't know what possessed me, but I crossed the porch and touched the front door. The wood was cold, damp, as though it had been raining inside. I expected it to be locked, but when I pressed the handle, it gave way with a reluctant groan. The air that poured out smelled thick and stale, like mold and rust. I stepped inside. Everything was eerily familiar. The creak of the floorboards, the faint echo in the hall. Dust floated in the air, catching the beam of my phone's flashlight. My heart pounded as I walked toward the far end of the hallway, where the locked door waited. Even from a distance, I could feel it, like a pulse, a presence pressing against the wood. That's when I heard it. The same sound from my childhood, faint but undeniable. Tapping. Slow, deliberate, from inside the room. My breath caught in my throat. The sound stopped as if it knew I was there, listening. And then my phone flickered. The flashlight sputtered, plunging me into brief, suffocating darkness. When it came back, the dust in the hallway seemed thicker, swirling like something had just moved past me. I didn't open the door that night. I couldn't. I stumbled back outside, gasping in the fresh air, my hands trembling. But as I turned to leave, I swear I heard it again from behind the door, muffled but clear. A whisper. My name. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. That house's creak, wood shifts, and memories can play cruel tricks on the mind. For days I carried on with my life, but the sound of that whisper wouldn't leave me. It wasn't just the fact that it said my name, it was the tone. Low, patient, like it had been waiting for me all along. Soon, the dreams returned with a vengeance. In them, I was always standing before the locked door. But now the door wasn't shut tight. It stood slightly ajar, darkness spilling through the crack like smoke. Every time I reached for the knob, I woke up. Heart hammering, drenched in sweat, the echo of a voice still clinging to my ears. One night I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m., the same time 3 nights in a row. My phone lit up by itself on the nightstand, and for a split second the lock screen glitched. It wasn't my reflection in the wallpaper anymore. It was the hallway of my grandparents' house, that same damn door at the end. I told a friend about it, half jokingly, hoping for reassurance. But he just gave me a strange look and said, "You know, sometimes places leave scars. Maybe you've carried a piece of it with you." The way he said it sent a chill through me, because deep down I already knew. I hadn't just left the house behind. The house had followed me, and then, as if to prove it, I started hearing the tapping again. Not in dreams this time, not even in that old hallway, but in my apartment, against the walls, against the door of my bedroom. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Old pipes, noisy neighbors, maybe even mice. I told myself a dozen excuses, but none of them explained why the tapping always came at the same time. Just after midnight, in slow, deliberate rhythms. Like knuckles against wood, like someone trying to get my attention. I recorded it one night, holding my phone against the bedroom door. When I played it back the next morning, the sound was there, faint but unmistakable. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. Over and over, as though it were a pattern. But the longer I listened, the sicker I felt. Because hidden beneath the tapping, almost buried in the static, was a whisper. It wasn't words I could clearly make out, but the cadence. It sounded like my name again. I didn't tell anyone else. I couldn't. The last time I tried, my mother brushed me off, and my grandmother only warned me again. Do not go back. Do not feed it. Feed it. That phrase kept repeating in my head, gnawing at me. What did she mean? Sleep became impossible. I'd jolt awake at the smallest sound, convinced someone was in the apartment with me. I checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times a night. I even left all the lights on, but still the shadows seemed deeper, thicker than they should have been. One night, while sitting in the dark with headphones on, I realized the tapping wasn't random. It was syncing with my breathing, slower when I inhaled, faster when I exhaled, as though something on the other side of the wall was listening to me, matching me. That was the first night I truly began to wonder if I was losing my mind. By the end of that week, I couldn't separate what was real from what was only in my head. The tapping followed me everywhere, on the bus, at work, even in the quiet hum of the grocery store refrigerators. Sometimes I'd turn sharply, convinced someone was standing just behind me, only to find an empty aisle. People began to notice the dark circles under my eyes, the way I startled at sudden noises. I laughed it off when coworkers teased me about hearing ghosts, but inside I was crumbling. One night, desperate for sleep, I left the TV running for background noise. I thought maybe the constant chatter would drown everything out. But around midnight, the screen flickered just like my phone had before. For a brief, stuttering second, the broadcast cut to static, and I swear I saw the hallway again. The hallway of my grandparents' house. That same door locked, waiting. Then it vanished, the sitcom laughter returning as though nothing had happened. I shut the TV off immediately, heart hammering in my chest. Silence filled the apartment, thick and suffocating. And in that silence came the tapping. Not from the walls this time, but from inside the closet. I stared at the door, paralyzed. The sound was louder now, urgent. I thought about opening it, about proving to myself that there was nothing there. My hand even touched the handle. But then, faint and unmistakable, I heard the whisper again. Closer, sharper. It didn't just sound like my name anymore. It sounded hungry. I backed away, trembling, and locked myself in the bathroom until dawn. Sitting on the cold tile floor, clutching a towel like it could protect me, I realized I was starting to understand what my grandmother had meant. Don't feed it. But how do you starve something that's already inside your life? I stopped talking about it with anyone. Every time I tried, the words sounded absurd even to me, so I carried it alone, pretending everything was fine while inside I was unraveling. Friends stopped inviting me out because I always declined. My boss pulled me aside asking if something was wrong, but what could I say? That a house I hadn't lived in for years was clawing its way back into my life? The truth was, I was afraid of people noticing. Because it wasn't just the lack of sleep anymore, it was what I thought I saw in mirrors. At first, it was just a trick of the light, a shadow where it shouldn't be. But soon my reflection seemed delayed, half a second slower than me. And sometimes, when I turned away, I caught the faintest image still standing there, staring at me long after I'd moved. The tapping grew bolder. No longer confined to nights, it followed me in daylight in crowded places. Once, while standing in line at a coffee shop, I felt a vibration against the counter. Tap, tap, tap. I looked down and realized it wasn't the counter, it was my own coffee cup, trembling in rhythm as though something beneath the surface of the world was knocking, demanding to be let through. That night I dreamed again of the locked door, but instead of the hallway, I was standing inside my apartment. The door wasn't in my grandparents' house anymore, it had moved. It was my bedroom door now. The scratches, the whispers, the sense of something waiting, all transplanted into the place where I lived. When I woke, the door really did look different. Not broken or damaged, just slightly darker, as though the wood had aged overnight. I touched it and it felt damp, like the old house all over again. That's when I knew this wasn't just memory, wasn't just madness. The house hadn't followed me. It was becoming me. I thought if I left town for a few days, maybe I could outrun it. I booked a cheap motel 3 hours away, told no one where I was going, and drove until the city lights gave way to empty highways. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of relief, like maybe distance could smother whatever was happening to me. The first night passed quietly. No tapping, no whispers. I almost convinced myself I'd left it behind. But on the second night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of water dripping. The bathroom sink was dry. The ceiling showed no signs of a leak, yet the dripping continued, steady, rhythmic. When I followed the sound, my stomach dropped. It wasn't water at all. It was tapping. It came from the motel closet. I froze in place, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. The tapping grew louder, sharper, until it rattled the thin wooden door on its hinges. And then I heard it, the whisper. Not muffled this time, not distant, clear, right against my ear. Open it. I bolted, grabbing my keys and fleeing into the parking lot, the humid night air clinging to my skin. I didn't stop until I was in my car, engine roaring, headlights slicing through the darkness. But as I pulled out of the lot, I made the mistake of glancing in the rearview mirror. The closet door was there. Not the motel's anymore, but the same warped, locked door from my grandparents' house, standing impossibly in the back seat, as though it had been waiting for me to look. I swerved, nearly crashing into the ditch, heart slamming against my ribs. When I blinked, it was gone. just an empty seat. But the smell lingered, damp wood and rust. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go anywhere. Because now I understood there was no running from it. It wasn't tied to a place anymore. It was tied to me. After that night, I stopped pretending it was stress or exhaustion. Whatever this was, it wanted me, and the more I tried to deny it, the stronger it became. I stopped sleeping altogether, afraid of what I'd see if I closed my eyes. The tapping didn't wait for midnight anymore. It came whenever it pleased, echoing from closets, cupboards, even from inside the walls. I called my grandmother again. Her voice was weaker than before, trembling, but when she heard me, she whispered the same words as always. "Don't go back. Don't feed it." I begged her to tell me what she meant, what the door was hiding, why it had followed me all these years. There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of her shallow breathing. And then she said something I'll never forget. "It doesn't live in the house. The house was only a doorway. It lives in us if we let it in." The line went dead after that. I tried calling back, but no one answered. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That night I sat alone in the apartment, every light blazing, my back against the far wall. I told myself I wouldn't move until sunrise. But around 3 a.m. the lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs hummed and dimmed until only the hallway remained lit. At the end of it was the door. Not my bedroom door this time, not a hallucination. The door. The same scratched wood, the same rusted knob, standing where no door had ever been. I couldn't breathe. My grandmother's words echoed in my head, but my body moved on its own. I stood trembling and took one step toward it. Then another. The closer I got, the louder the tapping grew until it wasn't tapping anymore, it was pounding. Something inside wanted out, and this time it wasn't whispering my name, it was screaming it. My hand lifted before I even realized what I was doing. The knob was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt, as if it had been buried in ice for centuries. The moment my skin touched the metal, the pounding stopped. Silence fell so heavy it rang in my ears. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe it was gone. Maybe all of this had been some cruel trick of the mind, unraveling under too little sleep. But then the wood beneath my fingers pulsed like something alive was breathing just on the other side. I pulled back, but not fast enough. The door shuddered once, twice, and then the scratches carved into its surface shifted. I swear to you, they moved. Long, jagged claw marks stretched deeper, fresh splinters peeling away as though invisible hands were raking them in real time. A voice seeped through the cracks. Not one whisper, but many, overlapping, rising in a suffocating chorus. They weren't just saying my name anymore. They were begging, "Let us in. Let us out. Let us in." My vision blurred. The hallway seemed to tilt, the air thick with the stench of rot and damp wood. I stumbled backward, covering my ears, but the voices weren't outside anymore. They were inside my head, clawing for space. I screamed, louder than I knew I could, and the sound seemed to push them back. The pounding ceased. The voices dimmed. And the door simply stood there again, silent, ordinary. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the door, it was me. It had marked me as a child, and every time I dreamed, every time I listened, I opened it a little wider. And tonight, I almost opened it completely. I stopped leaving the apartment. What was the point? No matter where I went, it followed. The tapping was inside my walls, inside my chest, sinking with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. Food lost its taste. Sleep came in violent snatches filled with screams that weren't mine. I covered every mirror, but it didn't help. Reflections showed up anyway. In windows, in the black screen of my TV, even in puddles on the street when I dared to step outside. Each reflection showed me standing in the hallway of my grandparents' house, always with the door behind me, always just about to open. The worst was the phone. I'd wake in the night to find it recording on its own, voice memos full of static and whispers. When I played one back, I heard my own voice, low and distorted, saying things I didn't remember. "It's hungry. It's almost through. I'll let it in." I threw the phone against the wall, shattered it to pieces, but the next morning it lay neatly on my nightstand, intact, waiting. By then I knew I was losing grip. My grandmother's warning circled endlessly in my mind. It lives in us if we let it in. But what if I already had? What if every time I dreamed, every time I listened, I had been feeding it, piece by piece, thought by thought, until there was nothing left that belonged to me? That night I woke not to tapping but to silence, the kind of silence that swallows everything, that makes you aware of your own blood rushing in your ears. I opened my eyes and the door was there, standing at the foot of my bed. This time it was already ajar. The crack in the door spilled darkness, but it wasn't the absence of light. It was something thicker, alive, like smoke that writhed and clung to the air. I tried to move, to scream, but my body wouldn't obey. My chest felt crushed, pinned by an invisible weight. All I could do was watch as the gap widened. From the darkness came hands, dozens of them, pale and thin, clawing against the frame as if desperate to crawl out. Their nails screeched along the wood, adding fresh gouges to the scars that had been there my whole life. And then the voices returned. Not whispers, not screams, but something in between, a sickening chorus that rattled my skull. They didn't just call my name this time. They spoke memories, my memories. Childhood laughter, secrets I'd told no one. The sound of my own sobs when I thought no one was listening. Each voice belonged to me. Pieces of myself fractured and thrown back at me, begging to be let in. Or let out. I staggered forward, not by choice, but pulled. Dragged as though invisible strings were hooked deep into my skin. My fingertips brushed the edge of the door. The wood felt wet, pulsing like flesh. And in that moment I understood. This wasn't a doorway to something else. It was a mirror. Everything I'd feared, everything I'd tried to bury, my anger, my grief, my loneliness was alive inside it, waiting to take shape. The hands reached for me. Some tender, some violent, all of them familiar. I saw my grandmother's face among them, her eyes hollow, her lips forming silent words. Too late. The door yawned open wider. Darkness rushed in, filling the room, swallowing the walls, the bed, the air itself. My last thought before it consumed me was simple, terrifying clarity. The house had never wanted my grandparents. It had always wanted me. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the hallway of my grandparents' house. Not a dream. This time it felt solid. The air thick with that damp, earthy smell I remembered too well. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, steady, inevitable, carrying me toward the far end. The door was there, just as always. Only now it was wide open. Inside, I could see nothing but blackness stretching on forever, a void that breathed like a living thing. The tapping was gone. The whispers were gone. There was only silence, waiting. I thought about running, about turning back, clawing my way out, pretending none of this had ever happened. But behind me, the hallway had vanished. There was no going back. The only way left was forward. Something moved in the darkness. Shapes, indistinct, folding over each other like shadows layered too thick. I could feel them watching me, countless eyes pressing against my skin. And beneath it all, a truth settled in my bones. This wasn't a place. It was a hunger that had worn the mask of my family, my house, my memories, just to lure me here. As I stood on the threshold, the voices returned one final time. Not desperate now, not screaming. Calm, certain. They spoke in perfect unison in a voice that was unmistakably my own. We're home. I don't remember stepping inside. I only remember the door slamming shut behind me. And now when people drive past that old house, they say it's empty. But sometimes, late at night, if you stand at the end of the hallway and listen closely, you'll hear tapping, not from inside the room, from the walls. Like something trying to get out.